There's every
Wow.
tendency you actually paid below the minimum wage, which is so frustrating because nurses are they're the bedrock of hospitals, they're the bedrock of any healthcare organization.
Today, I have an interesting guest on the show. Happens to be a nurse, but she's going to be doing something interesting on this episode. She'll be talking to us about nursing in an in-depth manner. Welcome to the podcast, Demystify with Emmanuel. I'm your host, Emmanuel, and today I have someone special on the show in the person of Rosemary Orefua. Hi, Rose. How are you?
Hi, Emmanuel. I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm in excellent spirit. It's so wonderful to have this conversation. I know we had like a chat yesterday that led to this, and eventually, I just thought of it. Why not kickstart this podcast with an interview with you, or a chat rather? I don't like to use the term interview. A chat with you, where we deep dive into some of what we discussed. But first and foremost, um, our audience would obviously like to meet you. So, who is Rosemary? Can you please tell us a little bit about you and why it is that you're in a good position to talk to us about this subject?
Okay, thank you for having me here. I'm honored to be on the podcast. My name is Rosemary, but for short, you can call me Rose. I work as a clinical research nurse, and I'm also a writer. Writing is also like an aspect of myself that I really enjoy, aside being a nurse. I've been a clinical research nurse for the past 3 years and been a nurse for 5 years. Prior to these, I worked on the ward before going into clinical research, but now I am fully into clinical research.
Brilliant. Thank you for agreeing to do this, having this conversation. And I'll just deep dive into it. First, borrowing from what you had said, what do you mean by you were a nurse in the ward and now a clinical research nurse?
When I graduated, I had 2 years experience in a ward setting where you can call it general nursing, but it was a ward setting for adult patients mainly. We had a ped section, but that was not my major area. And working on the ward, it's we could sometimes call it bedside nursing, where we have close contact with patients and direct patient care at the bedside rather than in a different setting or environment. So the term bedside nursing is like um, is a general term used for ward care. Working on the ward is, to be fair, one of the major or the first areas where nurses kind of go into if you're not planning to specialize. This is because after school, most times you want to get that clinical experience and hands on experience on patient care, and working in the ward is actually the best place to do that. However, I transitioned from bedside to clinical research nursing because as bizarre as it sounds to some people, I love research. In school, or while I was in school, we were introduced to research in nursing. Although it did not cover anything regarding clinical research nursing, it focused mainly on the academic side of things. I found that I enjoyed it, and I wondered if I could actually work in research. And in my search, my quest for knowledge, I found a specialty called clinical research nursing that was not known to many people. And I did a bit of study and of understanding what needs to be done, what studies I need to engage in, what courses I need to take, what specialized area I need to focus on. And that was where it all started. So my dream of being a clinical research nurse actually started before I left School of Nursing because I attended the School of Nursing, well, not College of Nursing, but it came into a reality 3 years ago.
Exciting. So, can you really outline what the difference is between being a bedside nurse. I hope that it's okay to refer to it as that. Between a
Yeah.
bedside and a clinical research nurse. Because I, for one, would say nursing is just, it's equal across the board. I mean, nurses are nurses, um, and you do a great job. I mean, nurses do such great job in the world of medicine, in the world of patient care, of people care generally. But then, what exactly is the difference? And maybe you could also pinpoint what other areas of nursing exist beyond the bedside nurse, the clinical research nurse, if there are other areas that exist.
Okay. For the first aspects, what are the difference between a bedside nurse and a clinical research nurse? So in general, bedside nursing is working on the wards. It could be a an ambulatory ward, it could be an inpatient ward. The idea is that it's not a specialization. So anything that becomes a specialization is moving away from the bedside nursing, in the sense that when you are, now don't get me wrong, it can be a specialization, but your care is still on the ward. Now, for example, we have oncology nurses that are specialized in oncology care, or care of patients with cancers, and they actually work on the ward. So in that case, they're still bedside nurses, but they are specialized in oncology care. The term in general for bedside nursing is the term direct contact with patients on at the bedside. So bedside is where you have a bed in the hospital where a patient stays in, they're admitted, they're cared for, their activities are met, their needs are met um, on the ward. That is the general term, or that is the general understanding of the term bedside. However, clinical research nursing doesn't occur only in the ward, because research patients are treated on the ward. So, but that's a different discussion. But in summary, a clinical research nursing is could be in an outpatient setting, could be in a laboratory, could be in a clinic, could be in a hospital, but it is the care of patients in clinical trials. This is
Okay.
also a patient focused specialty, because everything the nurses does revolves around the patient. So it is not removing the patient from the picture, it is just the approach of how things are done. Compared to bedside, where you're caring for patients on the ward in a shift per se, but clinical research nursing is not done like that. It's done in a different light. I don't know
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Perhaps you want to demystify that for us.
Some treatments are administered in a designated ward for clinical trials, and we call
Okay.
this clinical research facilities.
Okay. So, what is clinical trials?
So
What's
clinical
a clinical
trials,
trial?
clinical trials are they are scientific studies that are involved with getting new therapies or new ways of tackling, preventing, or treating um, diseases and ailments. They could be, you could divide them into two broad categories, which are investigational medicinal products. These are the ones that have to do with the medicine or a drug, or non-investigational medicinal products. And these are equipment, for instance, a device, a wristwatch that monitors blood pressure, or things like that. Those are non-investigational medicinal products. And clinical trials are like the
So, just to
bedrock.
sorry to cut you, but just to be sure that we have it clear. So, you say investigational medicinal products, right?
Products.
So,
Yes.
that's, if I get it right, that is referring to drugs, medications, right, that are
Yes.
new and they are
Yeah.
undergo research.
Yes.
Okay,
So
while
they
um, devices are just regular medical devices that have been invented, and then they want to run trials or run the test on them using people that volunteer for them. Did I get that right?
yeah.
All right. You may
So
proceed, please.
thank you. With investigational medicinal products, it could be a new drug entirely. We call
Okay.
this novel therapies where they've never been used. They when I mean they've never been used, they've never been used on humans. Um,
Okay.
or they could be existing medications but used for a different purpose. So,
Okay.
however, if they're existing medication used for a different purpose for which they were made, they are still investigational medicinal product because there's no much information regarding the new disease group they're trying to treat.
Okay. So, an example of what you mean. Say a medication is, you said if a medication has never been used on humans, is a
Therapy.
novel therapy, right?
Yeah,
So no, denoting something along the lines of novice, never used,
yeah.
right? Okay.
It's new. Yeah.
Okay. But if it's something that has been used for maybe a different condition, different indication, and now it's been tested for something else, what do we refer that? What do we refer to such drugs as?
They are
Just,
still they're still clinical trial medications or investigational medicinal products.
but they don't then get the designation novel therapy.
Yeah, they won't get that because they are already known medications,
No.
but not for the disease group they are trying to treat.
Oh, okay.
Monitoring is one of the things that are very, very important in clinical trials, regardless of the phase, especially if they're in the early phases of treatment. You don't want to try something new or something with little information on a large number of people without proper monitoring. Um,
Okay.
so yes, it can be very patient focused. Yeah, I think that's the word. It can be very patient focused because the research nurses are basically project managers for all the patients on the trial they run. So every trial have a designated research nurse that should or would know about the patient journey, that would know about the expected side effects of the drug, that would know and explain all of these things to the patient. And one thing to also notice for every clinical trial, before a clinical trial even starts, and before a patient gets on trial, it's a voluntary participation and informed consent must be gotten. So a clinical research nurse is involved in the process of informed consent as well. And there's so many areas that they're involved with, but I think the bottom line is that the patient is the center of what they do, is at the
Okay.
center of what they do.
All right. So I think you've pretty much brought up the next question I was going to ask. Can you sort of itemize the expectations or the duties of clinical research nurse? Because I'm sure there are nurses who will listen into to this podcast, and obviously one of the four questions on their mind, one of the questions at the front of their mind would be, okay, what are the things I would be doing? Especially what are the
Okay.
things I would do differently from what I usually do, as a
Okay.
clinical research nurse.
Yeah. I think I'll start with trying to talk about the things that would you would normally do or a nurse would normally do on the ward, and then bring in some of these skills and requirements into the clinical research space because they are very, very transferable. They are linked with each other in ways that yeah, they're so linked to each other. So for the ward, caring for patients is paramount, and everything that a nurse does is for the safety, the wellness, and well being of the patients. Attending to their daily needs, medication administration, psychological care, the holistic care in general. In summary, rather, the holistic care of the patient, be it physical, be it mental, be it psychological, be it emotional, trying to ensure that the patient is cared for and their relative and significant others is also carried along in the patient journey. This is something we do on the ward, documentation, and all of this. Now, bringing it into research nursing, it is no any different because caring for a clinical patient, a clinical trial patient is similar. You're caring for a patient regardless. It's just in a different setting. Most clinical trials run clinics, and that's where you kind of go through the safety review of patients. Safety review in the sense that taking of blood samples, the ECGs, assessments, and observations, which would also be part of ensuring the patient is safe. And these are done in a clinic setting. Sometimes when a drug is an oral treatment, it can be administered in the clinic, or if they need extra support or things that would run outside of the clinic hours, then they need to be in the clinical research ward. Now, this is where the clinical research ward comes into play. And we have nurses that are solely and they are employed and responsible for these patients. Their roles are different from the clinical research nurse in the sense that the clinical research nurse is the lead nurse for the trial. However, the nurses on these designated wards are the nurses. So in this case, they are also ward nurses or bedside nurses, but for clinical trial patients. Now, in terms of skills and what the role is like day to day, the day to day or the summary of what the day to day looks like is planning the patient journey. A lot of the time, what you do or what I do or what we'll do is ensuring the patient journey is as smooth as possible. From the moment they are contacted to discuss the trial, if it's something they want to do, to the process of screening. Screening is where they come in and they are checked if they are eligible for the trial because there are certain criteria that needs to be met, that a patient needs to meet before they are started on trial. This is for safety purposes because you don't want to include the wrong patients in the trial for their safety. So from the from screening through to the process of informed consent, because before screening even starts, informed consent must be taken. Usually we kind of link both of them together because it's like a joint thing where patient have give informed consent, and then you begin the screening process up to when they started on trial. And also it depends on the the kind of the phase of the clinical trial. Now, for early phase, which is also known as phase one, they are more intense than the later phases, which are phase three and four. This is also because, again, there's little knowledge known about the therapy that will be started. Yes, they've tested it on animals with the same biological makeup as humans, but every human is different. Everybody's different. The mutations, the metabolism, the way things work in everyone is completely different. So you cannot generalize um, the you cannot generalize people. That's why monitoring is very important. So getting the patient through from the beginning throughout the end of their trial, the process of the trial, for regardless of how long it runs, or maybe if for as long as they benefit from the medication, or if unfortunately they are not benefiting anymore, all through the process where the patient is on that trial, the nurse is in charge of seeing that everything runs smoothly. Now, this can entail getting what's it called? What's the word now? I forgot it. This can be from ensuring that the holistic care is also met, while in clinic, away from clinic. Documentation is key in clinical research because research without documentation, in fact, in nursing, without documentation, you've not done anything. That's what we're told. That's what we're always reminded
If
of. If you don't
maintain.
document, you've not done it. Yeah. Um, Also, your critical thinking skills is very important because research is a very fast-paced environment, and you just have to really, really take initiative. If you are, and you have to be very proactive. When we say a nurse leads on the trial, it means everything pertaining to nursing responsibility and role falls on that nurse in line with that trial and falls on the nurse also with the number of patients on that trial. So, uh, in in contrast to the ward, where when you run a shift, you have a certain number of patients allocated to you on that duration of hours, 8 to 12 hours that you're running that shift, you know that these are your patients. And when you leave the shift, you know that you may come back to them, you may not come back to them, depending on when next you're working or how long they're staying in hospital for. But it's different for clinical research because your patients, even when they come to clinic today, they come tomorrow, they're still your patients. So that's why it's, as I said, it's very patient focused, and you get to really, really know more about your patients so well. You get to build a very strong relationship with them. And I think that's one thing I really love about the job. It is very satisfying in that regard. Other skills that are important is team collaboration. You will get to speak to different people, so many people and so many teams, because for research, as far as my knowledge goes and as far as I've worked so far, referral comes from everywhere. So you have to be in liaison with the patient's local team or where they're referred from. This is because you may not know all you need to know about the patient. Um, yeah, medical history will be shared, and the necessary bits will be shared for the patient. But in terms of where they're coming from, you may need their local services. You may need them to actually, you may need the help of their local team. So you need that strong relationship with local teams. So team collaboration is very important. Now, this is external. Now, internal, when it comes to your team as well, the other research nurses in the team, the principal investigators, sponsors of the clinical trial, the CRCs, the clinical research coordinators in the team, the clinical trial coordinators, data managers, the CRAs, everyone. There's so many teams, there's so many people, so many roles in research, and you have to liaise with every single one at various standpoints for this patient. So team collaboration is one of the major roles. And one thing I really love about research is the fact that your your communication skill gets improved. Yeah. So your communication skill is important. And I always say, even if you feel like you're not 100% there at the start, it's going to get better when you come to research. From writing, is it emails? You're going to write a lot. To talking, you're going to say a lot. So communication skill, critical thinking, collaboration skill, team player, proactiveness, and basic Excel packages. Yes, I always say that as well. You should have your basic Excel packages in hand because they're very helpful. You will need them. You would really need them. And in the top of it all, again, is the patient care, the patient focus, the direct care that you'll be rendering to those patients. It's clinical research doesn't remove patients from the picture. You as a nurse, you're still very patient focused, and I think that's one thing many nurses do not understand because they think because you're now in a clinic setting or in a admin role, sort of, you're not patient focused. No, you still have so much to do with patients. I may not be covering everything. There's so much to do. There's so much to say, but in summary, I've just kind of highlighted some of the key things I feel would be needed. Would be needed. As in,
This is interesting. I know for now, this is for those of us who are probably hearing about this for the first time. Don't be confused. I know she mentioned a few acronyms: CRA, CRC, Clinical Research Associate, um, Clinical Research Coordinator, and a bunch of other positions. What is interesting is I we'll have, or we are going to have an episode where there'll be a deep dive into the different roles that exist in clinical research, right? But for this, I really wanted to start with a more patient, direct patient interactive role, right? And the clinical research nurses are like top tier, like up there when you start talking about patient interaction. They understand better,
yeah,
alongside the PIs, what happens to, the patient, how they're reacting to the medication, what the care is, what differences um, exist between individual participants in the study. So we'll go into all of that on another episode. But for this, I'll just move on to the next question, right? A little bit of comparison. Bedside nursing, clinical research nursing, you've had experience in both. Which are you more, which do you lean more towards? I think it's obvious, it's the
do
clinical
you need to
research.
ask?
However,
Clinical research nurse all through, like, even while I was on the ward, I just wanted out. Not for anything wrong, but because I realized I would not be satisfied. I wasn't having that job satisfaction. I would do my role as I could. Honestly, I I would work as if I would never leave. But the moment I'm leaving the ward, I'm like, I want more. This is not what I want to do. So I've always knew that I would leave the ward. I've always knew that I would go into clinical research. I told you, I started thinking about clinical research before I left school. So
yeah, you mentioned
staying
you
on the
did
ward
mention.
was not for long, was not in the picture. I just needed to get that ward experience outside of school, because in school you're shadowing the nurses on the ward. So while in training, you're shadowing the nurses on the ward. You're not allowed to do so much. But when you're outside school, you're graduated and you're working on your own, the difference is clear. So I wanted to get that experience before actually going full time into clinical research. And I'm glad I did, because it's it really helped my clinical skills, because yes,
Mhm.
it really built my clinical skills. I learned so much from venipuncture, which is blood taking, to cannulation, to like bedside management, IV administrations, catheterizations, like some of these procedures that you would do on the ward. I had so much experience with them while working. But I knew that I didn't want to do it long term, and I was gonna go into research. So I'll always pick clinical research nursing any day, anytime.
I kind of knew the answer to that, but of course I had to throw that at you. But I'm going to do a bit of shift now, right? We've talked about bedside nursing, clinical research nursing, and all that. But I want to zoom in a bit of deep dive into what it's like to be a nurse. What are some of the tools that nursing in itself takes on nurses, right? What are some of
Yeah,
the things? And
yeah.
I'll just kick off with an interesting question. What disease burden is the most difficult to manage?
Mhm. I honestly, every disease burden has its burden. I don't think I can actually pick a worse one,
Yeah,
but from my experience so far, I would really say it's oncology.
that is
This
cancer,
is
yes?
because, yeah, cancer. Um, this is because of the toll it takes, not just on the person, but also on their families.
Mm,
Cancer, as we know or may know, is something that most of the time is incurable,
mm,
which means once a patient is diagnosed of cancer, they are palliative patients. Now, palliation is not a bad word. I know when we hear the word palliation or palliative, we mean that, oh, they're at the end of life. No. So palliation is a different word from end of life. End of life is when the patient is actually actively dying. And that is towards the end of their life. But palliation means it's incurable. It's no more something that even if it's cured for a period of time, there's likelihood of it reoccurring, and that's what cancer is. So I think for me, I would say it's oncology. I currently work in oncology, and I've seen what it does. I've witnessed um, the burden on patients and their relatives. I've witnessed the high moments and low moments, the subtle ones, and yes, it's personally, I would say it's oncology. But again, every disease group have their burden. Just like
mhm,
if a pediatric patient, oh yes, that's going to be really terrifying for the patient and the parents and siblings. Um,
mm.
for a surgical patient, it's going to be terrifying as well. You do not know what the end game is going to be. So every disease group has their
So,
really lows, like they're really bad. But I would say for me, it's going to be oncology because I've had a feel of other areas to an extent, and oncology just tops it. It just really, really does a lot. It does a lot of shift to everything.
mm. And I think one of the reasons why I asked this question was while we were having that chat yesterday, you had mentioned, how sometimes to cope with it, you go to a park and you sit down and just, let nature talk to you while listening to music. Um,
Yeah,
I think I just wanted to brush on that a bit more, how you cope with the emotional impact of losing patients, especially during trials, because clinical trials, the idea is, we're trying to help people get better. Yes.
yeah,
We're
yeah,
testing new medication, new therapies, but the idea is we are hoping it works so they get better, right?
yeah.
What in clinical research, as a clinical research now, how do you cope with the emotional impact of losing patients? You can give us an insight into the numbers on the average in a
Mm.
clinical trials. What's like the percentage you typically lose? Since you said you've been doing oncology for a bit now, and how do you and possibly other members of the team manage the emotional impact that it takes? It's easy to always pinpoint the emotional impact on the direct family, parents, siblings, and all of that. But I think sometimes people overlook the impact that such events has or have on the medical
Healthcare
practitioners,
providers. Yeah,
especially when you take note of what you had said earlier about how you develop a closer relationship and better understanding of each individual patient. So how do you, as medical practitioners, as a nurse, how do you cope with the emotional impact?
Um, so before I go into that, nursing is there's when I was in school, I remember one of my tutors saying, "Oh, you have to remain empathetic," which is very true. You have to remain empathetic. But let's face it, we're human. Sometimes it gets into sympathy. And we try as best as we can not to make it get into sympathy. But again, we're humans. So
Mm,
nursing in general has an emotional toll on every nurse. Every nurse I've known, every nurse I've worked with, regardless of where or what specialty they're working in, um, they feel the emotional impact of caring for patients, of caring um, for people. This is not because of um, this is not because we are emotional beings, but because it is a very health when health is compromised, there is You get to see a person vulnerable, and seeing someone at their most vulnerable state can be the most humbling thing ever.
Mm.
And that's why sometimes you hear nurses are burnt out, or they're emotionally detached, or they are. Some people have said that nurses don't have a heart because we've seen so much death. Death doesn't surprise us anymore. It's not true. Sometimes that's just compassion fatigue. And
Mm.
for a nurse
Compassion.
to fatigue, which means you've got to that point where, oh, okay, it's done. It's happened again, and you're trying to not think much about it, but at the back of your mind, it's actually there. However, your expression, your reaction is like, okay, it's done, it's done. For a nurse to get to that point, it means there's been so many unchecked emotions, so many unchecked um, looking after. I would always
Mm.
be an advocate of looking after yourself. Working in healthcare, whether as a nurse, a doctor, healthcare assistant, whoever, pharmacist, laboratory person, but majorly those that are in the front line in direct patient contact and care, the emotional toll is no joke. And
Mm.
looking after yourself should really come first, because you cannot provide care if you're drowning yourself. Sometimes
Mm.
when I lose patients, or it makes me realize how feeble life is. But
Mm.
also, I there are times where, yes, I cry. I really cry for those patients and their families, especially when I know how much they've struggled and how much they put in, how much they fought. But at the end of it, it's got to that point. But my consolation most time is the fact that I did the best I could. And if the only thing I'm able to do at the end of their life is providing comfort and presence, then that is enough. And I think that's one thing we healthcare professionals fail to realize, that there's only so much we can do. If
Mm.
a patient is going to go, they're going to go. And it can be really, really depressing, really sad. But
Mm.
remembering that you've done your best, your possible best, you've left no stone unturned, you've been
Mhm.
there all the way, and really present, kind of gives me that calmness. So
Mm.
when I say I go into the park to sit and just think about everything, or when there are weeks where it can be so sad, where patients relapse, and you know that it's either they go into a different study, or if there's no other option, it's really a dire situation, and everything just feels like, what's the point? But remembering again that I have done as much as I can, and I would do it again. I would help again as much as I can if I have the opportunity. Then I think that's always enough for me to go through the emotional toll.
Mm.
Sometimes all I need to do also is just talk to other colleagues, talking to colleagues. And I think that's one thing we do in my team, which is very helpful. There are very bad weeks where we have so many patients come off trial, um, due to progression in the sense that their disease has come back, or they are not as healthy as they were before. Um, we do a sort of debrief in the team, which is very helpful, kind of like checking in on everyone and seeing where we're holding up to. And if a nurse or a colleague needs a moment to kind of get over a loss, or get over a bad news, then we give that nurse a moment. And I think that's one thing that every organization, every team should incorporate, because there are really bad weeks. There are really bad weeks. There are some weeks you're like, what is going on here? But having that um set of individuals that you can connect with and understand each other, understand the emotional burden that this brings to the team, is very important. I think that's one thing also that is very very good. Don't swallow it all in. You can talk it out. Talk it out with someone. Talk it out if you need to. Let it out. Do not keep it all in, because the moment you keep keeping it all in, you're telling yourself that, oh, it's normal. That's just what it is, and you're going to get to that emotional burnt out state. You're going to get that emotional fatigue that it's not actually healthy, because even when things happen to you personally, you're like, okay. So yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, looking after yourself is very important in healthcare. Do not neglect yourself at all. Don't take time to take a step back if you have to. It's one of the things that has helped me in coping with the
Mm.
emotional burden of the work.
Wonderful. I must say, kudos to every healthcare professional. Kudos to nurses, doctors, pharmacists, the research assistants, the hospital assistants, the orderlies, whatever role you feel, whatever role you fulfill in the healthcare profession. I think the accolades have to be given to you. I myself, I mean, haven't done a lot of monitoring of clinical trials for a number of years now. I know how I feel, and I'm not directly on site. I only come once a while, and when I hear that, patients have been lost and all that, sometimes it affects the entire office. Sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So I get it,
Especially
and I
when the patient has been doing so well or have been on trial
think
for long, it is so painful.
mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm.
mean, it's painful when any patient come off, but those patients that have been so well, you actually say that in fact, sometimes their disease go away, and then all of a sudden,
but,
it's really,
but
really awful.
pressure and all that, yes, exactly, it can really, really take its toll on you, and I get it, and I just applaud the team and the front liners as you are. You're doing a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful job, and I think it's one of the reasons why I said we need to have this sort of conversations where we shed more light on things. I think some people don't really understand the amount of effort, the amount of emotional hurt, and beyond the mental stress that even comes with being a
Yeah,
healthcare practitioner.
and
People don't understand,
the physical is there,
right? And
emotional,
physical as well,
mental,
because you're
and then
spending
the
hours and
financial.
hours. Well, so for real, I'm glad we're having this sort of conversation, and it's kind of line that we're pushing towards here at the channel. And I find it interesting that a lot of healthcare professionals do have something they want to talk about, something that burdens them that they feel could be done better to make life easier for them and for patients, right? But they never really get the platform. And I'm just so hopeful for what this channel is going to achieve with that. Are there other areas of nursing besides bedside nursing
Yeah.
and clinical research nursing also exciting that personally you probably want to dabble into a bit at some point? For people who are probably not wanting to go into clinical research nursing, or and then they are trying to see areas that exist.
Yeah, there are 1,001 rules, specialty in nursing, and I'll probably just list them just for, for
Mhm.
ease. The general nursing, of course, general care, med-surg. We've got the surgical nurses, which who only deal with surgical patients. We've got the theater nurses, they work in theater. We've got the anesthetics, nurse anesthetics, they deliver anesthesia. And that is one role I actually wanted to explore as well. So if at all I'm leaving clinical research, it's probably going to
Yeah.
be to explore nurse anesthetics. Yes.
Mhm.
There's also nurse educators, we've got nurse consultants, we've got nurse researchers, we've got wound care nurses, we've got pediatric nurses, we've got mental health nurses, we've got community nurses, we've got diabetic nurses, we've got in the
Wow.
UK, for instance, community nurses are called district nurses. So, but in Nigeria, we call them community nurses. We've got
Okay.
primary healthcare nurses, and they work closely with community nurses, if I remember correctly. Um, there's so many areas, to be honest. There's nurse practitioner. there's advanced care, advanced nurse practitioner, there's clinical nurse specialist,
Just
there's
like
like
then.
there's so many. The list is endless, honestly. If you really want to explore other areas of nursing and you feel like you don't want to settle on one particular, this is the maternity nurses, you know what? Every single aspect of the body has a nurse specialty there, just as
Like
medicine would.
have exactly, exactly.
Yeah, so just as medicine would, every nurse have their specialty as well. So the sky is the limit, really. Just Google. Your Google is the best friend. Google is your best friend. Just Google. You'll find 1,001 there. But if I was to leave clinical research nursing, it's most likely going to be nurse anesthetics. I was also considering nurse education and nurse consultancy, but one thing I've realized is nurse consultancy can come into every other aspect of nursing. So in a way, I'm like, okay, that's fine. But a specific specialty is probably going to be nurse anesthetics. I like it. I kind of find it interesting.
You have garnered experience both in Nigeria and now in the UK. You've been in the UK for about
Yeah.
2, 3 years, right? So I think one
Yeah.
thing that would be important to address would be what are some key differences between nursing here and nursing over there? What could the Nigerian nursing system take from what they have over there, and what could be employed over there that is being done here? A kind of, weighing of
Mm.
both sides, and what this side has better than the other, and what this side has better than the other. And I just want you to talk about that so that for our listeners, those
Yeah.
in both sides can take lessons. Yes.
So, because I didn't school here, I don't know what the education system is like. But if it's in terms of experience and work experience, like hands-on experience, what
Mhm.
I've kind of noticed, which I think the Nigerian government is beginning to employ, is making the government sector or making nurses more interested in the government sector. In the past, the private sector were more readily accepted in terms of incentive, in terms of care. However, the some private sector in certain areas were still lagging behind, and also some government sector were lagging behind. But now I think they're trying to do something where the government sector is kind of unified, which I find quite interesting here because that is the case here. The NHS is the public sector, public healthcare, and is a healthcare service that is available to all. Um,
Mm.
so you could say that's the general for Nigeria, if that makes sense. But what I've noticed also is the general in quotes in Nigeria, except it's changed now. Please, whoever you can correct me if I'm wrong. Certain states have their certain criteria. So it's not a unified number or a unified pay or a unified progression rule or unified process for every state. Rather, it's state individualized, which I feel shouldn't be the case. It should be generalized for everyone, regardless of where you are, north, east, west, or south. You should have the same kind of basic idea of what your role and your progression is going to look like, not because you're just in Lagos, for instance. You're most likely going to earn more than someone in Ogun State, but you're also in the same government setting, if that makes sense.
Mm.
However, it's not the case here where a banding system is used for everyone, not just nurses. In a public sector, a banding system is used for everybody. And you can kind of like determine how you want to go. The one thing I find interesting though is that here you're not automatically promoted, unlike
Okay.
the system in Nigeria where you after a couple of years and your proficiencies or your what's the word? It's the proficiencies, appraisals, you're promoted.
Yeah.
Um,
Based.
yeah, you're promoted and also which increases your salary. But in this place, it's a banding system where the band you're currently on has 3 pay scales. So you start at the very bottom, and then after a couple of years, you scale into the second, the intermediate, and then the third. After a couple of years, you go into the highest pay for that band. Or you, no matter how much you work, or for as long as you work in that band, you're never going above that highest scale until you apply for another higher band, which again is quite different from Nigeria because it's done based on promotion rather than banding, if that makes sense. Um,
Mm.
I think the other thing is because I worked a bit in the private sector in Nigeria. To be honest, I didn't actually work in the government sector while I worked in Nigeria. So the private sector needs a lot of check because there's nothing unified. There's absolutely nothing, and
So
every
they just pay.
private um, yeah, it just depends on how much you're able to sell yourself, really, and what the organization themselves can offer. And I think that's one thing. And I'm sure it's quite similar here in the private sector. But again, this is quite different because the government has made, in the UK, the government has made a base salary. So even if you may not be earning as a certain amount, you kind of have an idea of what your base salary would be because the minimum wage is this, and every organization must follow that. And but I don't find that being applied. I know there's a minimum wage in Nigeria. I don't find that being applied in the healthcare system for nurses, which is not very good. It's an eyesore, honestly, when it comes
That's
to
for the private
the
sector in Nigeria. You're
the
saying for the private sector in Nigeria, there's no real
yeah,
um, recognition of the minimum wage that is set by the
no,
government. So you
there
could be
isn't
on
because it's really poor.
private sector in Nigeria. You could be potentially
Yeah.
paid below the minimum wage. That is.
Yes. So there's every
Wow.
tendency you actually paid below the minimum wage, which is so frustrating because nurses are they're the bedrock of hospitals, they're the bedrock of any healthcare organization. You cannot function without a nurse. And I'm proud to say that. I would say it any day and any time because it's the truth. So when I see that their nurses are not recognized as they should, it really breaks my heart because there's so much we put into, so much effort we put into, so much care, so much of us we put into our roles and responsibility. But the 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 reward is nothing to write home about, which is sad. And I know the nursing organization is doing one or two things to make this better, but I really wish they would do more and wish the government would really do more because I'm talking of Nigeria now because it's really painful and really hurtful. I worked in Nigeria and I know what it is. I know what the um this pay scale is like, and nah. It needs revival.
Wow. Well, I mean,
It's
I guess
revival.
the idea is to improve. Hence, why conversations like this are very important.
If you want to go into
Mhm.
clinical research. So good clinical practice is very important. You
Okay.
do not need to really read about everything, but having an idea of what good clinical practice is quite important if you want to go into clinical research because it kind of highlights where everyone or what everyone should be looking out for when it comes to caring for research participants.
So it's something you can go online to find. Yes. Good clinical
Yes.
practice. Okay.
Yes, you can find it if you're in the
So
UK. You can find it on NIHR, I think.
okay.
Yeah, I think
How
in
many
Nigeria, CTI, if I remember
CTI?
correctly. Yeah, um,
I know
I
there's
think
a
those are
global
the
health
yeah.
network. I think. Yes, I think.
Yes,
But
there are quite a
you
few
could just
places
put
you
it
can
on
find it.
Good clinical practice (GCP),
Yeah.
and you get a number of sites where you can take the trainings and get yourself informed about clinical trials and the proper guidelines. Um, One other question, just a funny question, is: do you plan to return home sometime to practice?
Practice.
When
It's
you
not the
get better?
picture right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the picture right now, so I can't really give much information about that.
That's very okay. That's very okay. Thank you so much. This has been very insightful, very, very insightful.
You're welcome.
And to our audience, to our viewers, for you watching this and you have other questions, you have things you want to know about, you want to contribute, you can just go to the comment section and put it there. We'll take our time. I will take my time to go through the comment section one at a time and address, your questions. If there are things that, I can obviously answer, especially when it comes to these peculiarities of nursing as it were. I can easily relate them to Rosemary, and when she provides the feedback, and I'm sure she'll also try to be on the comment section um, to help out when there are questions. Please do try to look at the comment section when this is
I will.
uploaded, and you
I
can
will.
help provide answers. Thank you so so very much. This has been
Thank you.
truly, truly educative. And I'm just excited for what we're trying to build, what we're trying to achieve with this podcast, with this channel. It's beyond just talk and talk. It's more about really pinpointing key things, the good, the bad, the ugly, and
Yeah, ugly. Yeah.
um, trying to push it out there so that solutions are made, solutions are suggested or implemented. Hopefully, we have key opinion leaders in the field of nursing listening in and taking one or two messages. On a final note, I would say uh, to you, Rosemary, thank you so much. Thank you for doing
Thank
this.
you. Thank you for having me.
Been wonderful having you on the program. Possibly we'll have you back to discuss other things at some point. Do
Happy
enjoy the
to.
rest. Thank you. Do
Thank
enjoy the
you.
day. Yes, or the rest of the evening. It's quite late
Yeah,
actually.
it's
The
Friday. Yeah, and you too. All
is
right.
it 10 or thereabouts in the night? And you So thank you so much. And to every one of us watching this, listening to this podcast, thank you so much for taking time to listen to the very end. There's a lot more coming. I've got conversations lined up that would really, really, really take you by pleasant surprise, right? I've got a number of top tier people in their field who have a number of things to share. And like I always say, we are looking at healthcare worldwide. However, we are trying to focus and zoom in really in the Demystify with Emmanuel podcast. We're trying to focus mainly on healthcare, on drug development, clinical research in Africa, because it's quite sad that the representation of African clinical trials is like less than 5%. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rosemary. I think as of the
Yeah.
last research I read a few days ago, so he said less than 5%. I think somewhere between 2 and 4% is where it sits. Perhaps it's now about 5-6%. I'm not so certain, but that representation is so poor, and it's so poor when you consider that Africa accounts for about 25% of the world disease burden. When you juxtapose both information, you realize how far behind we are and how much we need to put effort into ourselves and really drive home the message that we need to look out for ourselves and take care of ourselves and improve on the health care system, improve on research as a whole, because more and more the world is tending towards targeted therapies, targeted treatment, because we understand that there are a lot of um, genetical differences, morphological differences that exist in individuals. Even people in the same family, there are a few differences in
Yeah.
them that bring about differences in how they interact with medications. So we are trying to really, really address some of these subjects, some of these conversations, and please like this video. It's taking a lot of energy, a lot of strength. I mean, I came back from the office to make sure, and I started setting up to make sure we have this conversation, because I was like, we have to do this. We have to share this. So please like the video. Comments, like I said, your comments, your suggestions, your questions, whatever it is, please put them in the comment section and we'll do well to address them. And of course, please subscribe. A lot more is coming. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and you'll be glad you did so. I promise you'll be glad you did so. There's a lot more coming, a lot more scintillating conversations, things that would help your mind really see into things, especially in the health area, things that are not so out there in front of people, but yet they play a very critical role in each and every of our individual lives. So thank you for joining
Thank
in the
you.
podcast, for joining. Thank you, Rosemary, and thank you to you that listened. Enjoy the rest of your time. Bye bye.
Bye.